The bells of Le Havre convent tolled midnight when the first scream tore through the silence. Not a child's cry. Something deeper. Something that didn't belong in a 10-year-old's throat. By morning, 11 more girls had joined her. This is the true story of the 1878 Le Havre possessions, and the truth that hid beneath them was far more disturbing than anything demonic. The convent sat on the edge of the French coastal town, a refuge for orphan girls with nowhere else to go. Most had arrived within the same 3-month window that spring. Thin, silent, flinching at sudden movements, the nuns thought time and prayer would heal them. They were wrong. It started with Marie, 10 years old, quiet, the kind of child who apologized for taking up space. On the night of April 3, 1878, she woke the entire dormitory with a scream that didn't sound human. Her back arched off the mattress at an angle her small frame shouldn't have allowed. Her eyes rolled backward, and when she spoke, when the sound finally came, it wasn't French. It was Latin. Fluent, unaccented Latin, a language Marie had never been taught. The nuns froze in the doorway, candlelight trembling in their hands. One of them would later write in her diary, "I have heard Latin spoken by bishops with less confidence than that child possessed." Word spread through the convent by dawn. By the following night, 3 more girls convulsed in their beds. Within a week, 12, the church moved quickly. Priests arrived from the diocese with holy water, crucifixes, and centuries of ritual behind them. They performed exorcisms in the chapel, one girl at a time, the others listening through thin walls to screams that echoed off stone. 6 months. 6 months of ritual, prayer, and increasingly desperate intervention. The possessions didn't stop. If anything, they grew more synchronized, girls convulsing at the exact same hour, speaking in voices that seemed to answer each other across separate rooms. As if something moved between them in the dark, the town began to talk. Was this a curse on the convent itself? Had something ancient been disturbed in the old stone foundations? Local newspapers printed increasingly lurid theories. Pilgrims began arriving, hoping to witness genuine demonic manifestation. And then, in October, a letter arrived from Paris. Dr. Auguste Voisin had built his reputation studying hysteria at the Salpêtrière Hospital, a place where France sent its most inexplicable psychiatric cases. He didn't believe in demons. He believed in patterns, and when he read the reports from Le Havre, one detail caught his attention immediately. Every possessed girl had arrived at the convent within the same narrow window of time. He requested the convent's admission records. The Mother Superior, exhausted and desperate for any solution, granted him full access. What he found waiting in those documents would unravel everything the church believed was happening inside those walls. Voisin arrived at the convent on a gray October morning, carrying nothing but a leather satchel and a notebook already half filled with questions. The Mother Superior expected a priest's authority, or perhaps a scientist's arrogance. Instead, she found a man who simply watched. He didn't perform rituals. He didn't quote scripture. For 3 days, he sat quietly in the corner of the dormitory, observing the girls during their episodes, timing the convulsions, noting which words repeated, which girls triggered others, which hours of the night brought the worst of it. On the 4th day, he asked to see where the girls had come from before the convent. The records told a story the church had never bothered to investigate. All 12 girls had been transferred from the same regional orphanage, a smaller institution outside Rouen. Shuttered abruptly the previous winter following what the paperwork vaguely called administrative irregularities. No further explanation was recorded. But Voisin noticed something else buried in the transfer documents, a name that appeared repeatedly across every single girl's intake file. Sister Agathe, the orphanage's former overseer. Voisin requested an interview with Marie, the first girl affected. She was calmer during daylight hours, though her eyes carried the particular hollowness of a child who had learned not to expect kindness. He asked her gently about her time before Le Havre. At first, she said nothing. Then, almost as if the words escaped before she could stop them, she whispered, "We had to look at her portrait every morning, before breakfast, before we could eat. Voisin asked who. Marie's hands began to tremble. Sister Agathe. If you looked away, she would know. She always knew. The pattern crystallized with horrifying clarity. Before their transfer, these girls had lived under the authority of a woman whose portrait hung in their previous dining hall, a portrait they were forced to face every single day, likely alongside punishment for infractions real or imagined. And in their new convent, the chapel contained an almost identical painting. A stern, unnamed benefactress from a century past hung directly above the altar where the girls knelt daily for morning prayer. Different woman, same posture, same cold, appraising eyes staring down from an elevated position of judgment. The children's bodies didn't know the difference. Voisin theorized that the girls, already fractured by whatever occurred at the previous orphanage, had been re-traumatized by an environment that unconsciously echoed their abuse. The convulsions weren't demonic invasion. They were the body's desperate language for terror that had never been given words, terror that returned in full force the moment an unconscious trigger, a painted face watching from above, activated memories the mind had buried too deep to consciously access. The Latin, he later theorized, likely came from repeated exposure to liturgical chanting during their previous punishments, memorized through fear, not faith, then surfacing involuntarily during dissociative episodes that mimic possession. He proposed a controlled experiment. With the Mother Superior's reluctant permission, the portrait above the chapel altar was quietly removed one evening after the girls had gone to sleep. The next morning, the dormitory was silent for the first time in 6 months. Not everyone recovered immediately. Marie still flinched at footsteps for years afterward. 2 of the girls carried what Voisin's notes called residual nervous conditions well into adulthood, but the convulsions, the growling voices, the impossible Latin, all of it stopped within 3 weeks of the portrait's removal. The church, uncomfortable with a resolution that involved psychology rather than divine intervention, quietly closed the case. Official records listed it as a successful spiritual cleansing. Voisin's detailed clinical notes, which told a very different story, remained buried in French medical archives for over a century before historians rediscovered them. What happened at Le Havre wasn't supernatural, it was something arguably more disturbing. Proof that childhood trauma could manifest with such force it mimicked the demonic, that a body denied the words to describe its own suffering would eventually scream in whatever language terror provided, even one the mind had never consciously learned. The nuns who witnessed those 6 months never fully agreed with Voisin's conclusions. Some insisted, until their deaths, that genuine evil had briefly inhabited that convent. Perhaps, in a sense, they were right, because what inhabited those girls wasn't a demon summoned from hell. It was the echo of cruelty inflicted by human hands. Cruelty so severe that even after the beating stopped, even after the original abuser was gone entirely, her presence remained embedded in these children's nervous systems, waiting for the smallest trigger to resurrect itself in screams. Sometimes the most haunted place in a house, or a convent, or a chapel with the strangers, portrait hanging too high above frightened children. Sometimes it's a body that was never given permission to say what happened to it, until the terror grew loud enough to scream for itself, in whatever voice it